The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family business with experienced craftsmen offering wood, vinyl, and composite windows. WindowWorldOfWesternMA.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Eastworks, a 500,000 square feet dedicated to artists, entrepreneurs, and nonprofits where community happens. Learn more at eastworks.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith. Flying solos! Later in the show, we'll take a tour of the innovative printmaking studio Zia Mays in Florence. And word nerd Emily Brewster will explore a listener question about stressing of syllables. But first, the exhibit Sewing History, Reaping Justice, Writing Children's Books About Slavery in Canada and the U.S. North features 18 original illustrated children's books created by the students in the spring 2025 UMass Amherst Art History course, The Visual Culture of Slavery. We return to our conversation with student authors Emmanuel Nkaranga, River Riddle, and Georgia Brabeck, and professors Charmaine Nelson and Raphael Rogers about the works presented.
Dr. Charmaine Nelson.
Thank you. I just want to draw the comparison to the powerful words of Professor Rogers, because in Canada, that's not the case at all. So there's a deficit in all slavery children's literature and a deficit in all moments of time on the Black experience being represented in children's literature in Canada, period. Here's the sad truth. When Black parents in Canada want to buy children's books that represent Black people, we're buying African American content for our kids. We cannot find that content for ourselves, for our children, about Canadian subjects. So again, one book to date, written in French, on slavery, and again, what we have is stuff celebrating mainly white Canadian abolitionists through the Underground Railroad. There's a huge deficit. The dominance in the children's literature are the scholars and the writers and the illustrators who are focused on the tropics, representing plantation slavery that abound. The ones representing Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maine, you're going to dig just as hard as you're digging in Canada to find those books.
What was the most difficult thing about putting these books together? I mean, it's hard to put a book together, period.
I witnessed Khalees's journey from beginning to end. It took 7 years. That's longer than one semester.
It was a real long process, but especially when you throw pictures into the mix, it makes it even harder. So for you, what was the hardest part of this process?
I think for me, it was distilling down my language for a younger audience. I'm the third youngest in my entire extended family, and I'm 22. So I'm not around children all that much. I haven't read children's literature since I myself was a child. Having to pare down my language and make it accessible for young children was a real challenge for me as someone who, writes at a college level. A true test of one's knowledge is if you're able to distill it down for the average person. It really is a test of your knowledge to be able to do so, and it really made me investigate this, the Amistad Mutiny, to just a much deeper level, and I think my understanding of it increased tenfold as a result of this project. So,
I would add that for me, at least, a really difficult part was confronting my own biases. I wrote a book about where I grew up and a history that I frankly had never heard. And so it was really revelatory in a way to be okay, actually the history that I understand about Minnesota, about my birthplace and where my family's from is not what I thought it was. So grappling with that was challenging for sure.
Yes, the language was so hard for me to break down for the children, but imagination helped me come to that, because slavery is tough. Talking about it is so heavy. But then getting it to a child who is, 5 years, 6 years, I had to use some little imagination. It's kind of interesting, but also giving out the information.
Emily, barely talked to you here, but if we come to the old Newman Center on UMass campus, what do we see as part of this exhibit, and how long can people come see it?
So the exhibit is up until June 6th. What you'll see when you get here is a glass case showing the original books, so those are on display, as well as panels that show excerpts of the books. So each of the students' books are featured, and you can read an excerpt and see illustrations from each of the students, along with some panels that describe the themes that we've been talking about, about the journey from Africa, about resistance, about enslaved biography, and about enslaved children. And so those kind of line the walls to give both information and illustration to these topics.
Has working on this project and being in this class changed your perspective towards the art that you look at on your own?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, I saw it in a different, worldview of, vulnerability, but with a different kind of fighting back, like resistance for children. How do they resist? They don't have the muscle and force and the vocabularies to fight back.
Can I just jump in too and say for Emmanuel's also an architect, and Emmanuel's final research paper, which is coming up, he's focusing on Monticello. So I'm sure the class too has helped transform your understanding, right? Because we just had a long conversation, if you wanted to talk about that yesterday, about he's trying to recuperate the enslaved experience of living at Monticello. That's
Which
not
is
what
Jefferson's home.
Thank you. And that's typically not what scholars have written about. The plethora of scholars who've written about Monticello want to know how Jefferson lived in that space and how his white wife and white children, not Sally Hemings and the mixed race children that he was,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at that project, the Monticello project. It has transformed my understanding of how slavery can be presented, because like Professor Nelson talks about it, my perspective about Monticello was, the design perspective, the ornamentation, the Palladian architecture that Jefferson admired. But then talking about children and how they resist compared to how the slaves in the house at Monticello resisted, they're so different, and I also talking about Monticello, if you look at the 5 cents, the US money, it's the only private building on US money. And you're supposed to have these public structures on it. There's a lot of ethical dilemmas in the whole book, children's book about slavery, that you wonder how this 40-year-old or 30-year-old forced a 5-year-old to do things they wouldn't force their own child to do. So that's what I'm trying to balance, looking at the hard, mature arts in representation of slavery, and then look at this soft, vulnerable life, and how do you break it down for those audiences?
This class has definitely changed how I think about my research. I focus on European art in the 16th and 17th centuries. I suppose the way I had always thought about it is that slavery is something that happened in the colonies, in the Americas, and so it's not really something that we see in Europe. In actuality, that is not true at all. There is a long history of people of African birth and descent in Europe, and this class has allowed me to really engage with those archival records and start thinking about how Black people are portrayed in European art during this period, which is in a really objectifying and kind of exoticizing way. So it's a new avenue of research that I really am excited to pursue.
I feel much the same way. I did my honors undergraduate thesis in contemporary art of the Dutch Caribbean during the decolonial, post-colonial period by colonially marginalized artists, and that's largely from a higher point of view, installations, etc. And that's obviously in the tropics, in South America, in plantation economies. So I feel like this class has really, really complemented this very well and gave me this other perspective. I'm from Massachusetts, and I didn't learn about the history of slavery in Massachusetts at all. I learned about the Underground Railroad, naturally. I feel like this has just really enriched my understanding of transatlantic studies in general. So,
how do we think about accuracy in the books that you produce or these types of books? Something that we're often thinking about when we look at these representations of slavery in these texts. What were you all thinking about when it comes to, is this book accurate? How will I show that? Was that on the table for you all? And if you don't mind sharing, that would be good. Sorry. You're not in class. It's all right. You're not in class. Let's pass.
All right. Yeah.
I think accuracy was definitely on my mind. And I actually, when I set out to write the book, intended to tell the story of Dred Scott's daughter, who spent the first years of her life in Minnesota at Fort Snelling. However, the records are so scant. The Dred Scott case is really fraught with legal jargon and very mature themes. I didn't really want to take that route, so I had to lean into fiction. I had to take it away from perhaps the most factual avenue. But I think the most important part is that it's still rooted in truth. Large parts of this fictional biography are actually taken from the records that we do have of enslaved women and girls in Minnesota.
Kind of similarly to that, I'm covering the Amistad Rebellion, which is, an actual historical case. So historical accuracy for me was incredibly important. I think one of the ways that I tried to do this was Joseph Cinque, which is his Spanish name, is kind of the leader of the Amistad Rebellion and the most known figure of this history, but I chose to use his actual name, which is Sengbe, because so often enslaved people were stripped of their names and given new names, and I didn't want to participate in that historical pattern, so that's one way that I tried to remain as historically accurate as possible, but also trying your best to, portray these often violent events accurately while not sanitizing them in the process, which is a very, very difficult thing to balance.
In terms of the question of accuracy, took that as my responsibility as well, to make sure that they got things right. And so, for example, in Emmanuel's brilliant book, I think the original ending, you had Kambuka was escaping in a clear-cut fashion. And I said, okay, it would be better if you leave it open-ended, that he tried to resist through flight, but we're not sure what happened. Otherwise, you might be giving the impression to the student readers that everybody who tried to escape was able to escape. In another example, a student wrote about Quebec, and one of the images had a gathering of about 20 people celebrating and playing music together. And I said, was not going to happen in Quebec City. Let's rethink this. So why this is so important to the accuracy is, again, that I'm publishing everything. So it means a lot then that the students are sharing their work with the world, and we want to get it right. Yeah, and sorry, Emmanuel wanted to.
I would say for the high schoolers that I've worked with, in terms of they write reviews about the books that we examine, and age appropriateness is a consideration, but historical accuracy is another. And in this state, there's a focus on helping students with historical thinking skills. So what's on the table sometimes is stuff like sourcing and corroboration. And the questions that emerge, like, Rogers, you're talking about accuracy, but this plantation owner wrote this. Or you have these folks that were writing about plantation owners, other supporters of slavery. Slavery's a good thing. These folks don't mind being in, those are the sources that exist. So how do you deal with accuracy matters? They ask, when you have this source that's sort of naming this. So it opens up a conversation around sources and bias. And I think for me, those are some really rich conversations about how history is constructed and whose sources we depend on, who's constructing this history. And we also have great conversations around the historiography of slavery too, in terms of how historians have written about slavery over time and how that shapes sometimes what's produced in these texts. So it's a complex issue for the students that I work with, how do I know what's accurate? And digging into the sources and thinking about who wrote said source, and just thinking about how slavery has been constructed by historians and the questions that they have. I think it's important for the students that I'm working with.
Thank you all so much. This is excellent. It's really exciting to be able to see this. It's cool that the world will get to see it published, but that you can come to UMass campus and see it with your own eyes.
And see it, yeah.
I have to say, you all are lucky. It's great to have a professor that's doing work like this. I think it's important for you all to be thinking about all the questions that you thought about for this project. So you're fortunate. Great work.
The exhibit, Sewing History, Reaping Justice at Slavery North, closes on June 6th, so you've got a little time left to check it out. Find more information at slaverynorth.com. We'll check out a reader question about pronunciation conventions with word nerd Emily Brewster after we go create new works to celebrate the 25th anniversary of ZMA's print studio in Florence. You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering Co-op Advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
We are in Florence, Massachusetts, or I believe if I'm correct, this is the Bay State neighborhood?
This is the Bay State neighborhood.
To get more micro-neighborhoody, about what's going on here at ZMA's Printing, who this year is celebrating a quarter century of printing and will have an open house this Sunday. What's your name, ZMA?
No, I'm Liz Chalfin. I'm the founding director of the studio.
What is the name ZMA from if you're Liz Chalfin?
ZMA's is the botanical name for the plant sweet corn, and it's a plant that's a hyperaccumulator, which means that it takes heavy metals out of the soil and stores it in its fibers, and it restores the earth to healthy, plantable earth again. And I picked it as a metaphor because what we do here is safer and non-toxic approaches to printmaking.
It's also awesome that Bombyx, which is named after the moth, that is a fun name of a thing, but it has a very interesting history. You're like right down the street, and there's ZMA's named after the botanical.
It's all about Florence, right?
Yeah, right?
So shall I give you the grand tour?
Yes, please.
I'm curious, especially how downstairs is different from upstairs.
Sure. So when we used to be at the Arts and Industry building, that's where we started.
Which is another mill building in Florence where lots of artists have studios.
Absolutely. And we started in a tiny studio and then moved into a bigger studio. But any time that we had a class or a workshop, we had to kick our members out. So because we had a class coming in. So when we moved here in 2012, we wanted to create a space that our members could work no matter what else was going on in the building. So upstairs is our member studio, and this is for members only. This is their space. They have their storage here. We have our lunch table here. We have our library up here. We have our little kitchen. So it's a much more social place. It's a kind of our artist's home. Downstairs is the more public part of the building. That's where we have our classes. That's where we have our gallery right now. That's where we do private lessons. So it's kind of like two studios in one. In the member studio, we can accommodate 7 people working at any one time, and they sign up for time and space. They work here. Their prints dry on the drying racks. It's a really nice way to kind of see what folks are up to. And we have our letterpress.
Yeah, this is really cool. The letterpress, I don't know what it is about a letterpress, but there's something really fun and amazing.
Yeah, I mean, giant wooden type. How can you not love that, right?
And then all the way that they're organized in their drawers and stuff is fun. Yeah.
And working in frames is really neat, working within a framework sometimes.
Absolutely, and sometimes you need that structure. Otherwise, it's like way too open-ended, right? And then our office is also here. We're a very small staff. We're basically a family business. So this is 4 of us share this office. This is Kay, who does our marketing, media, business, website, all of that stuff.
Hi, Kay.
Shell, my husband, shares the office, and he does primarily our residency program. And I'm in here, and then our shop technician, Angela, also shares the office. So it's a tight space, but we consider it home.
Nice.
And then this is the apartment for our visiting artists, our artists in residence. So artists come, as I said, from all over the world. We just had someone from Switzerland. We've had artists from all over Europe, South America, Asia, because we're one
Port-au-Prince?
Yeah. Anyway, they get to stay here, so it's an adorable little apartment. 2 bedrooms.
It is cute.
Kitchen. Isn't it sweet?
Yeah.
Very monk-like. And a little sitting room.
Do you ever have 2 artists staying at the same time?
All the time. So we've never had people not get along. It's just, I mean, artists are a wonderful breed of people, and printmakers especially are so used to sharing equipment, and people who come on residencies are also used to sharing living quarters, because that's often the case when you go on a residency. So the people that stay here are either residency artists. When we bring in teachers from out of town, we house them here, and then our members who live far away, if they're coming for several days and we have an open space, then they reserve a room.
About how many members do you think you have?
We have around 200 members.
Wow.
Which is a lot. They don't all work here. I would say probably 50 come and work here, but we offer so many other ways for them to connect with the community. We do a project called the Flat File Project, where they can consign artwork to our flat files for a year, and curators pull shows out of it. We're going to have a 25th anniversary show at the Contemporary Art Museum at UMass in the fall, and that was pulled out of the flat file. We have a virtual lunch that happens every week. It's been happening since the pandemic, and people from all over the world that are members go to that. It's a chance to share work and share trade secrets and whatever. They have a topic every week, and they've been meeting weekly for now 5 years. It's amazing. And then they get discounts on workshops and things. So there's other reasons to be a member besides just wanting to come and use the facilities.
We are taking a tour of Zia May's printmaking in the Bay State neighborhood of the Florence neighborhood of Northampton to micro dial down into some of the fun places of the 413. You might remember it from the building where Building 8 used to be.
Such a loss.
And we're with Liz Chalfin, who is the founder of Zia May's, giving us a tour because it's their 25th anniversary this year, and there's a big open house here this Sunday.
Exactly, 10 to 3. So I just want to point out this cornstalk print on the wall was made by one of our artists in residence, Rosenda Alvarez Faro, who came from Puerto Rico. And if you notice on the outside of our buildings, there's like these ghostly plant images. Well, they originally looked like this, but the sun has faded them over the time. And one of the projects that we're doing with the community on Sunday is adding plant matter to this outdoor mural. So people will be making prints of some of our local healing plants, kind of in keeping with what we do here. And eventually those prints that are left behind will be added to this mural outside.
Very cool.
So we're going into the screen printing studio. So you might be familiar with silkscreen, that technique. This is where it happens. We have a dark room here for people to shoot photographic imagery on their screens. We have a printing area here, and we have the washout sink there, and then all the screen storage and ink and everything in the next room. And one of the research projects we did through our internship program is we developed a completely plant-based ink. So not using any of the acrylics or any of the harmful stuff that is often in screen printing ink. Although many of our artists still use acrylic ink, and we do a process here called flocculation, where we keep those acrylics out of the water system because it's harmful to aquatic life. So we've developed a whole process for capturing all those acrylic solids. And we've taken that information to conferences and symposium around the world and share that information on our website. It's really important for us to get all the research that we do out into the world so other people can try it and implement it and make changes in their own studios. So we want to find any way we can to be as sustainable and safe as we possibly can.
It's interesting because, you know, the Arts and Industry Building, a former mill, and all these mills that used to be along the river were doing untold amount of damage to the river. And now the fact that people are reclaiming these spaces as art spaces with an environmental bent to try to reclaim some of the damage that was done, I think is wonderful. How common is the kind of printing that you're doing here at Zia May's, or are you an outlier in the industry?
We're definitely an outlier. I would say I could probably count on one hand how many studios in the world have this focus and dedication. And I think that's why we attract people from all over, because we're kind of a living example of what it looks like to work in this way. Because it's one thing to kind of read about it, try it in your own home studio, but to start to scale it up, we're kind of an example of a studio that's scaling up.
I feel like I should point out that behind your head on the wall is a poster that says flocculate, be kind to the fishes.
Flocculate is my new favorite word that sounds like you're saying something you're going to get in trouble for, but you're not.
Exactly. It's a good word. All right, let's keep going. So now we're back in our teaching studio, and this is where we offer our workshops, and we have private lessons in here. It's also our main etching area. So around the outside edges, you'll see these red tanks. Those have our different mordants in it, the chemicals we use to etch metal. And it's a very versatile space, so it could be an etching workshop, it could be a space for a monotype workshop, or a space for woodcut or litho. So we have this as a very flexible space. And our baby Lola, the Vandercook, is over there in the corner. That's our letterpress.
Why do you call it Baby Lola?
We rescued this press from a barn in Greenfield. It was rusted. It was in that barn for 20 years. And I had an intern at the time who was a former military helicopter mechanic. And he took the whole thing apart down to its last nut and bolt and cleaned it and put it back together and painted it this beautiful 1949 color.
It's gorgeous.
And he named it Lola.
And it has its name on it.
Yeah, she's our baby Lola.
Her name was Lola. She was a printmaker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to take you in here.
We're in the annex now.
We're in the annex, which is the private studio that our artists and residents get when they come.
Oh,
so
fun.
It's got its own entrance. They have 24/7 access. It's got our biggest press. Right now we're setting up for the Sunday open house, but it's a really nice space and it's got great energy. People just love it.
You've got the processes up on the walls too, just in case anybody ever forgets.
Yeah, those are our etching techniques. I call them our cheat sheets because there's so many different steps and they have to be done in a particular order to be successful. So rather than constantly referring to a manual or asking questions, we just have them on the wall. Someone can just look up and say, oh, I do this. Oh, next I'm going to do that. Keeps it simple. We have a lot of stuff posted around the room. We have all the chemistry that we use. We have it posted with all the safety precautions you need to take, what kind of PPE you need to wear if you do, how to deal with a spill, how to deal with cleanup, just because we want everything to be really transparent. We want people to know what they're working with and know how to use it.
I do love that one of the steps for working with coffee is roll on ground.
Yeah.
Just like as if you were on fire.
Right.
Yeah. I love hearing non-printmakers think about what these mean.
There's big hard ground. There's big soft ground. Yeah.
I'm really into big hard ground right now.
Yeah, right.
It's so good. Well, big is, so the ground is the resist that we cover the etching plates with. It's called the ground. And there's an artist in Wales who invented a safe, non-toxic ground, and his name is Andrew Baldwin, so he named it Baldwin Intaglio Ground, B-I-G. So that's what the big is.
Gotcha. And now that we've got the lay of their new building, we'll meet some of the artists sharing their facilities and knowledge as the folks at ZMAs get ready for their open house this Sunday, after which we'll find out why we emphasize syllables the way we do with word nerd Emily Brewster. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Tell us about the structure of ZMA. So, like, you can take a class here, or you had some online classes during the pandemic, but there's memberships. How does it work?
Absolutely. So there's so many different ways to access the studio. We have a membership program. People can join and then they can purchase access hours. So they can do that in bundles, 50 hours, 100 hours, unlimited hours. There's all kinds of different tiers depending on how far away or how close they are. We also run workshops, probably around 30 a year. We do intensives in the summer. We do workshops throughout the year, everything from a beginner class to something for advanced artists. We have a mentorship program. We have an artist residency program. We bring in artists from all over the world. We have local members like Stacy, who's a recent
Hey, Stacy.
member who just joined. And we have an online school. And this is Erica, who's here and is our studio monitor today. So upstairs here, we're in our member studio. There's 7 workstations. So when people sign up to come work here, they get 2 tables and access to press and all the equipment. So it is kind of like their little mini studio for the time they're here. Mm-hmm. Stacy's here for the week, so he's going to leave his stuff there and come back every day for the week. Cool. Susan might be here for a day or 2, and then she'll clear her stuff out, so it opens up that space for someone else. Mm-hmm. So we have kind of this revolving group of people, and on any given day, there could be 1 or 2 people in the studio, or there could be 20 people in the building, all doing different things. Someone taking private lessons, someone doing their residency, members working, a class going on. It can be a very lively place. Cool. And before Erica has to leave, I want you to meet her.
Hello, Erica.
One of our studio monitors.
What does a studio monitor mean?
It just means that I answer the phone, I help people with their presses. I'm just in charge of things up here, and I clean up and I set up, and I just basically look over everything and help people.
So when you become a member, you get a tub and your stuff goes in the tub, and when you're here, you pull your tub out and go to a workstation.
You got it, exactly. And you get a shelf for your flat stuff.
Cool.
As well. So before these two artists leave for the day, I want to introduce you to Susan Byrne, who is one of the artists who will be demonstrating on Sunday. And she's a woodcut artist. Yeah. And this is Susan.
Hi, Susan. Tell us about what you're working on over here.
Well, I am primarily a woodcut artist, and what I'm doing right now is prepping some blocks for the Sunday demo. But this is an unusual process that I learned at a workshop at CMA's. They have great workshops. So I'm using my wood blocks as sort of tools, more in a monotype version, so interrupting the design. So I print like block to block, which is very different. Normally you print block to paper. Mm-hmm. So I do block to block, and I get a very different design.
That's cool.
Yeah, can you show us?
Sure. So I just have one here that...
So it looks kind of like a puzzle right here with these beautiful kind of floral and curved, designs cut out of it.
Yeah, but clearly, like the pattern that we're seeing on some of the blocks is from something else.
It's from this block.
Yeah.
So I inked up this block and then flipped a clean block on top of it, and basically used it as a cleaner.
Oh,
so
cool.
I push it through, and now I have sort of two tones of the colors. And this is the kind of result you get.
Oh, that's real fun.
Because woodblock can be very graphic.
Yeah.
And for what I'm doing here, I didn't want so graphic a design, so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
but all
for
from
Sunday.
this same
All
process
from-
from these woodcuts.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That accent, Texas?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Via Ireland.
So you took a class here at CMA's, and
Yeah, I've taken
were you doing that? Were you doing printing before, or was this something that because this was here?
I came to art from a very different world. I came from investment banking, believe it or not.
It's a different world to come to art from. Although it can afford some really good art.
Yeah,
It can allow art to continue if used wisely.
Yeah, right.
that's exactly right. So I retired from that and rewired to do art. And just after the pandemic, actually, I joined CMA's. I took an online class that they ran during the pandemic. And then I've taken multiple classes here and learned from the members, from Liz, from everyone. But I love the feel of the wood and the carving, and there's a control to it or something I like, so. But I do combine, like I learned Sheen Calais from Liz at another workshop. So my next step is to try and combine that with my woodcut, so.
Do you do your own printing stuff too?
Yes, I do whenever I can, if it's not too busy.
What style?
Well, what I'm working on right now is I have drawers and drawers of prints. I've been here since the beginning, since ZMA started, and I've just been repurposing my prints and making collages out of my old prints recently. But mostly woodcut and monotype are the two processes that I do.
We heard a little bit about woodcut over there. What's monotype?
Monotype just means that there's one existing print. So you create a plate in various ways, and then you print it, and it's a one-time print, mono. And you can use different materials, you can use stencils, you can make all kinds of lines, and they're all different ways of paint, doing monotype.
Nice. Monotype, the kissing disease.
No.
Oh, that's different.
No. No.
And that's what Stacy's up to, too. He's working on monotype, monoprint. So there's if there's a fixed image in the plate and you print it different ways, it's called a monoprint. But if there's no fixed image and you're just working on a slick surface and rolling ink and painting ink, then it's a monotype because there's just one. Mm-hmm. And that's what he's working on.
Let's go check Stacy's stuff out now that we're talking all about you from over here.
Well, just keep talking about you over here,
Okay,
not
great.
let you involved in the conversation about you.
Yeah.
So I come over from Chatham, New York, actually, to print here.
Not Chatham on the Cape.
Not on the Cape.
Too bad.
Chatham
Chatham
Valley,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
valley, yeah.
Right near Bard, right? Where
Yeah,
that's where my son goes.
near
yeah.
Bard,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, so I do sculpture, painting, drawing, and prints. And in this particular series I'm working on, which is monotype with coleograph, so I'm actually incorporating pieces of paper that I cut out and put them over the plate before it's printed. And then you end up with a sort of embossed. Can't quite see it on this one, but it ends up embossing into the paper a little bit.
That's really cool.
Because I'm a sculptor, it sort of makes sense to me to have this dimensionality to the piece. And they're one-off, so I build the piece, and then I ink them up separately, and build the plate and pull print. And then I'll pull a ghost print sometimes, which is a secondary print.
So you actually no longer a monotype. It's a duotype.
You're getting a duotype. Exactly. And I like to look at creativity as a virus. We're all infected, but artists have it the worst.
Yeah.
So here we are.
We're back to mono again.
Yeah. Either you're collecting baseball caps or you're making art. We all have it in us, whatever it may be.
When did the internship come into being in the lifespan of ZMAs?
Thank you for that question. The internship program started when I first started the studio 25 years ago, but it's morphed over time. Now our internship program has two components, a research component and a workshop assistance component. So the interns come for a 6-month period, usually 2 at a time, and we figure out a research project and spend 1 day a week working on whatever that problem is. You know, in one case it was how do you make screen printing ink out of plants? Another case it was how do you make a transparent ink that left the market that everybody loved that we wanted to replicate, you know? Or it could be can we etch using a bioplastic that we make ourselves? And that answer was no. But often the answer is yes. The transparent base, actually, we sold the recipe to an ink manufacturer, and now they manufacture it based on our recipe.
Cool.
But we also keep the recipe online for free for anybody to make themselves. So the internships, aside from working on this research project, they also assist with the workshops. So they get to watch all these different teachers teach their different styles. They participate in the workshops. They bring their own energy and enthusiasm and skill set to the group, and they get a lot in return. And they're members for a year, so they get a membership for the year. It's been an integral part of the studio since we started. Well, come in here. I want you to meet Joyce.
Hello, Joyce.
Hello.
What are you working on?
Teaching studio. I am involved in the open house, which is happening on Sunday. And one of the main things that's going to happen there is give an opportunity to the community to print, to actually get their hands inky and cut up plates and make drawings, and that's what I have here. I spent the day making colors that people can print with. There's a few examples over here. I'm into these things that, you know, are pretty simple, low tech, and transfer drawing and making these foam relief plates is so fun and accessible, and you can print them by hand, but you can also run them through the press. So we've got examples of running through the press multiple times, changing the colors slightly, doing direct drawing. Yeah, it's how kids and families and people who are not printmakers can just immediately get involved in the materials.
And so this is the kind of thing people will be coming to witness and to experience on Sunday?
Yes, so in the morning from 10 to 12, we'll have this art-making activity for people of all ages, relatively simple. The transfer drawing that Joyce demonstrated, and then some very simple carving into some foam plates. But then from 12 to 3, our member artists will be demonstrating all the different techniques that we offer here. So there'll be people doing etching, woodcut, the photo processes we do, screen printing, monotype. So it's going to be a really great way for people to just see what happens inside this building in the corner of Bay State.
Well, thanks for taking so much time with us and making this beautiful print for us and letting us make our own prints over there.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you. I'm so glad. I hope your audience comes on Sunday and checks it out for themselves.
Check out our show on Saturday to hear us making some prints with rollers and everything. It's wicked fun. And thanks again to Leah Chelfin for showing us around. Up next, a listener question and a lesson in pronunciation conventions from word nerd Emily Brewster. You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
It's time to hang out with the Word Nerd and learn more about language. And today we are going to learn about the way that we say things, which is to say stresses in syllables and words.
That is right.
Cool. Comes from a listener question.
I have the listener question. Can I go ahead and read it?
Please do.
Okay. This is from Jeannie from Florence. I just heard your fun piece about different ways to pronounce the same word. I have a word that I'm wondering about. Incomparable. Or incomparable. I bump into it when reading prayers used to describe God, as in, "O thou incomparable, incomparable God," which I read to mean impossible to compare, or there is no one who can be compared to God. So, do I say incomparable, accent on pair, which sounds American to me, or incomparable, accent on com, which sounds British to me?
I tend to lean towards the former. I tend to say incomparable.
I do too.
Yeah, but I'm realizing now, especially after talking with you for a couple of years now, that I, in my language and the way that I speak, tend to try to truncate the syllables as much as possible, whenever possible.
Interesting, right. It's about efficiency then.
Right.
Very laudable impulse, I think. Well, in looking at this, I thought about other similar words because incomparable seems to really buck a trend. So let's think about where the accent is in incomparable. It's on the second syllable, right?
Right.
Instead of on the third syllable. And in a word like inconceivable, 1, 2, 3, it's on the third syllable. Unbelievable, it's on the third syllable. Undeniable, it's on the third syllable. And so what exactly is going on here? Why is incomparable, which is actually both pronunciations are given in the Merriam-Webster.com, but the first one that is given is incomparable. Now, the basic trend in English, it's particular when you get multisyllabic words. What we usually do is we calculate the word stress from the end of the word to the beginning of the word.
Okay.
And the second to last syllable, which is called the penult, it gets the accent or the stress. Those words are synonymous. It gets the accent or the stress when the syllable ends in a consonant, or when the vowel is long, or when the consonant sound ending it is a very vowel-ish sound, like l or So we have a word like agenda, where it's second. That's that second to last syllable. We don't say agenda.
Or agenda.
Right, or agenda, right.
Which definitely sounds more like a name. This is my
or a
friend.
disease, agita, right?
Afflicted with agenda.
Now, when the second to last syllable, when that penult syllable is weak, when it doesn't have much substance to it, when it is a schwa sound, we actually move the accent to the anti-penultimate syllable, so the third to last one. So we have a word like America.
Okay.
Or philosophical, cerulean, university.
Okay.
So that is the usual pattern in English. Now, the funny thing about incomparable and incomparable is that we actually see that same pattern, even though it seems different. It's because the number of syllables changes between the words. If we use our counting from the end of the word with syllables, when we say incomparable, the last syllable is bull, the second to last syllable, the anti-penultimate syllable is pair, and then the pair gets the accent, which is what we would expect the pattern to be. But in incomparable, prabul are the third and fourth syllables, but neither of them has that strong content that com does.
Right.
And so that again, it's the anti-penultimate syllable that is getting the accent. So both incomparable and incomparable fit with this usual stress pattern of English and its multisyllabic words, but the difference is how many syllables are actually in the word.
Right, it's 4 versus 5, so they're in the same place, but because they have different syllables, we hear it differently. Oh, cool.
Now, it is true that there are differences in British and English pronunciation, but they are not to the degree that most people think. When I was looking into this, the book I always turn to for comparisons between British English and American English is Lynn Murphy's The Prodigal Tongue, which is really a fantastic book that I know we've talked about before a little bit. The subtitle of this book is The Love-Hate Relationship Between American and British English. Now, according to Lynn Murphy, one study found that 1.7% of the words in a particular pronouncing dictionary showed accents on different syllables for British English and American English. Only 1.7%.
Do they show that same difference in amount of syllables? Because now I'm thinking of words that have different pronunciations there and here, like aluminium.
Yes, aluminium is one that right, and those are differently spelled even. Those are true word variations. You know, they're aluminium. Again, that follows the expected stress pattern for that multisyllabic word, and aluminum does also. That 1.7% number that I quote you comes in my mind with no other information, because her book just mentions it and it doesn't go into depth. So it would be interesting to look more closely at what the content of those are. Yeah, those different variations in those words affect them. But there actually aren't that many words like aluminum and aluminium. We really do have more similarities than differences in our word choice and in the word stress patterns.
What happens in words that are shorter? I'm thinking perhaps of caramel and caramel.
Oh, yeah. Where there we only have 2 syllables, right? Well, caramel has got 3, and caramel has got 2.
Right.
What is going on there?
I mean, I feel like it's the same, because it's like if you've only got 2 and we're making it caramel, you're still getting the stress early.
It's the second to last syllable. It just happens to be also the first
syllable.
Right. And the same thing with caramel. It actually follows the pattern.
Right.
Now, English sometimes uses word stress to create variation in words. So we have a word like insight, and we have the word incite. We have the word present and the word present. That pattern with the noun and the verb variation goes back a long way, hundreds of years.
Oh, really?
Where you have the present having the verb with that syllable on the second, with the accent on the second syllable, and then the noun having the accent on the first syllable.
Is this why people get so lost in the desert looking for sweets? Because it's not actually a verb, and that we don't have a good way to differentiate the two.
We do have dessert, right? Dessert, right. Desert. That trio is really quite something.
Don't go looking for sweets in the sands, kids.
Sometimes it seems that the British prefer a pronunciation that is kind of not French, in my mind. So they will say chauffeur, and they say valet. We say chauffeur and valet. I don't have any evidence to back this up, but I sort of think that this ties into the prestige that French borrowings have in English, but then maybe also some British resentment of the French. We tend to idolize them. We don't have those histories of wars.
I believe your theory for sure. Also, valet sounds so like valet and ballot should not. It feels weird that they rhyme.
Well, so much of word accenting and really of language in general feels like, and truly is, convention. I mean, patterns emerge and linguists study patterns, but for the actual learner, kind of the impulse behind it is really one of convention. These things just, when one thing sounds right and another thing doesn't.
And that actually keys into the thing I was thinking about earlier, where Extemper has a song where we use the word cadaver. But the way that we sing it, like it's interesting the conventions that change when musicality is added to it, because you'll see stresses moved for the sake of a line all over the place. And in that particular song, we say cadavers because it works better.
Cadaver.
And it took a while to get the rest of the folks in the band on board with that being the way that we were going to say it, because I was not changing the melody. But it's interesting that musicality might add a little bit to this conundrum too.
Oh, definitely. And poetry also.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And there's that license to create variation there is, I mean, you have it completely. Say it again.
Cadavers and cadavers.
Cadavers. Now, if I were going to put the accent, if somebody told me to put the accent on the first syllable, I would probably end up saying cadaver.
Oh.
And putting the schwa in that second syllable.
That makes sense.
Cadaver. Yeah. I don't know if my son will like that I am outing him like this, but my 14-year-old, we're all language people here. But he plays with the accents in words pretty frequently. So he'll say a word with the accents on wrong syllables, and I won't know what he's talking about. I really will have. It'll take me much too long to figure out what it is that he's saying. Incurable, right? Original instead of original.
Oh my goodness.
You can
sounds so original. Definitely sounds like you're getting called into HR later. But it's fun to put the wrong emphasis on the syllables that never see enough attention.
Cadaver. Why can't I say it,
Cadaver.
Cadaver.
Yeah.
Cadaver.
Which
I need to hear the song clearly.
Well, it's coming out when our album does later on in the fall. Well, thank you, Emily Brewster, for getting into stresses and how they relate to English and other languages. And if you've got a question for the Word Nerd, you can email us at thefab413@nepm.org. Thanks so much, Emily.
Thank you, Khalees.
Our pleasures. Our pleasures. Sure.
Our pleasure.
Oh no, we're back to HR.
No, that's pronounced.